election. Heads they win, tails we lose. And worse yet, a faceless and nameless group of tech employees at these companies now wield tremendous power to censor speech and enforce their viewpoint on political discourse upon the general public. If George Orwell had thought of it, he would have loved the term content moderation. Consequences of big tech censorship are felt far and wide. Take, for example, big tech's approach to censoring criticism of pseudo-scientific lockdowns during the coronavirus pandemic. Well, these lockdowns were almost universally rejected in pre-COVID pandemic preparedness plans. Lockdowns at the time of the pandemic were favored by the, quote, narrative. And so in the name of, quote, science, articles and posts warning against lockdowns were taken down and censored. The result has been the destruction of millions of lives across America, as well as increased deaths from suicide, substance abuse, and despair, without any corresponding benefit in COVID mortality. Shouldn't such monumental policy questions have received a full, open, and robust debate? Social media platforms have become among the most powerful mechanism for a private citizen to make his or her voice heard. It is incumbent upon us to ensure those voices are not capriciously and vindictively targeted. And the worst part, they change the rules constantly based on whatever they deem to be politically correct at any given point in time. These rules and standards are often changed without the knowledge of their users, moving the goalposts on Floridians and others who use these open forums for discourse and as a source for information. When a social media company applies these standards unequally on users, this is discrimination, pure and simple. Can you imagine tolerating this kind of behavior in banking or in healthcare or in other industries? So today we announced during this legislative session that we will seek to do the following. Ensure that Floridians are safeguarded against these practices from technology companies by requiring proper notice and disclosure of these changes to the standards and full disclosure of any actions taken against a user for violating the standards. We'll also seek to prevent these platforms from rapidly changing these standards and applying them unequally against users. We'll also require that users be provided the option to opt out of the various algorithms these platforms use to steer content, or in many cases, suppress content from the view of other users. But these provisions are of no use without enforcement, and we will provide recourse for Floridians both by enabling a user to bring a cause of action against a technology company for violating these requirements of Florida law and empowering the Attorney General to bring action against the technology company for violations of these requirements under Florida's Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practices Act. We've also seen the breadth of big tech's influence on campaigns and elections. While there wasn't a state in the union that ran a better election than Florida last year, we still saw on a national scale how articles, candidates, and content had the thumbprints of big tech executives all over them. You can look no further than the last several months of the election as coordinated, calculated efforts were undertaken to advance an increasingly evident political agenda of the big tech companies. The problem is these companies are playing a significant role in the advancement of issues and candidates, but do so without recording many of their efforts for what they are, political contributions. If I were to give something of value to a candidate or political committee, it would be a contribution. But big tech has been manipulating news content and designing algorithms to give the upper hand to their candidates of choice, and they do so scot-free. Again, euphemistically called content moderation. I think it's more political manipulation. That's why in Florida we're going to take action. We're going to take aim at those companies and pull back the veil and make sure these guys don't continue to find loopholes and gray areas to live above the law. Under our proposal, if a technology company deplatforms a candidate for elected office in Florida during an election, a company will face a daily fine of $100,000 until the candidate's access to the platform is restored. Again, any Floridian can deplatform any candidate they choose. You simply unsubscribe, and it's a right that I believe belongs with the citizen. Further, if a technology company promotes a candidate for office against another, the value of that free promotion must be recorded as a political campaign contribution enforced by the Florida Elections Commission. And lastly, if a technology company uses their content and user-related algorithms to suppress or prioritize the access of any content related to a political candidate or cause on the ballot, that company will also face daily fines. The message is loud and clear. When it comes to elections in Florida, big tech should stay out of it. Now, big tech has long since abdicated the protection of consumers for the pursuit of profit. We can't allow Floridians' privacy to be violated, their voices and even their livelihoods diminished, and their elections interfered with. And with that, I'd like to invite Speaker Sprowls up to make his comments.
Thank you, Governor DeSantis, not just for being a leader here today with legislative leaders on the issue of censorship and big tech, but really being the national leader, being outspoken on that. I also like to thank my friend, Senate President Simpson, for your work and the work of the Senate chamber on this important topic, notably Senator Danny Burgess, formerly Representative Burgess, who's done a great deal of work on this. In the Florida House, as we roll out this initiative, the point person will be our Commerce Chair, Representative Ngolia, who has worked long and hard on this topic and knows a great deal about it. Will be taking the point for us in the House. You know, a fundamental understanding of what it means to be an American is that we have equal access to the town square, a place that we can share our thoughts, our ideas, our beliefs with our fellow citizens. For years, I've talked about the corrosive effects of social media on the fabric of American life. The town square has largely morphed into social media platforms, and those platforms are evaporating our public square. The use of mystery algorithms, shadow banning, and other deceptive techniques distort the public square like a funhouse mirror, exaggerating our fears and feeding our rage. No one elected these companies to pull the strings of American life. They act like the 5 Wizards of Oz. Today we begin to pull back the curtain. If our democracy is going to survive, we must stand up to these technological oligarchs. We must keep Facebook, Twitter, and other unaccountable big tech companies accountable here in the state of Florida. They control our personal information, our photographs, videos, online relationships with our friends. Today we're announcing a proposal to make sure that these actors won't go unchecked here in Florida anymore. Social media companies want you to believe that they have your best interests at heart, but they are out for their bottom lines, their best interests, and their ideas. Big tech firms have evolved into a kind of modern-day public square. And in doing so, they have access to private information and the ability to exercise control over individuals' free speech. Their elusive standards, secret protocols, and mysterious algorithms are being used to manipulate discussions in that public square among our people, our citizens. And during the pandemic, as people have moved their discourse and interactions more and more online, big tech giants remain unaccountable for their actions, accountable to no one. And they don't follow any rules or standards. And if they do, they surely don't share them with you or with I. With our proposal, we're going to bring into the sunshine what I call the 5 families of darkness: Facebook, Twitter, Google, Amazon, and Apple. They are the big tech giants that are leaving users in the dark. With our proposal, we are pushing the barriers to finally call out their convoluted and inconsistent standards for censoring, banning, and deplatforming. We're saying no more to secret algorithms that provide no way for consumers to opt out. We won't let them continue to pick winners and losers among established news outlets and qualified political candidates. They can't keep frequently changing their terms of use without the consent of the user. And their antitrust ways of controlling the price in the marketplace for advertising on their platforms are coming to an end. The governor mentioned at the turn of the 20th century that it took a Republican president to push back on monopolies in order to break them down. Now it will take a Republican governor and a Republican-led legislature to do the same. Florida is taking back the virtual public square as a place where information and ideas can flow freely. We are demanding transparency from the big tech giants. Under our proposal, users will have the rights to their personal opinions and how their discussions will be handled. They will receive a detailed explanation and written notice after being deplatformed or shadow banned. And they will be aware of the algorithms used on how their posts and other users will appear in their news feeds. We will no longer allow those content moderators to stay in the darkness. These are basic transparency measures that should have been provided on day one by the big tech platforms. Today, we join as we declare that Floridians take back control of their big tech and social media giants and hold them accountable. Today, we stop the insanity of censorship and secret algorithms. I'm proud of the leadership of the Florida House and our friends in the Senate and the governor on this topic. As we begin to tackle this issue every day, the message to Floridians should be very clear. We will no longer allow this to happen. We are now here for you to push back, to bring these secret algorithms, secret shadow banning policies into the sunshine.
Yes, and first of all, I want to say that, the big tech companies has a duty to allow differing views on their public platforms. No one should be excluded, but let's be clear, they are targeting conservatives because they are engaging in political censorship. Congress has the true power to make changes to this terrible policy that big tech has to discriminate, and it's wrong. There's not much we can do as a state. Obviously, the governor and the speaker, along working with the Senate, has outlined some very good plans to work on these things. But we need Congress to act on a nationwide basis to put this into place for our entire country. I really want to thank Governor DeSantis for his leadership role in this area, the Speaker of the House, and we have two very fine representatives and senators here to speak to this issue more, and we're looking forward to working with the governor's team to get this finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor, and good morning, everyone. So first, I would just want to thank the governor for his leadership on the issue. I thank you for everything that you're doing in this space. I want to thank the speaker for allowing me to usher in this piece of legislation, which I think is very important. I look forward to working with President Simpson, his leadership, and with Senator Burgess on getting this done. I believe that this is an important piece of legislation for numerous reasons. This issue, I've been talking with the speaker well before the last election, and he expressed an interest on putting a clamp down on these monopolistic behaviors of these big tech companies. And I think it's at the point now where Floridians are getting hurt. They're being put at a disadvantage. And I think we as a state need to step in and do something. So to give you some anecdotal evidence, for those of you who follow me on Facebook, not necessarily Twitter, my constituents are on Facebook, and I communicate with them via Facebook. I posted the other day, I made a graphic when Hernando County was getting ready to allot 1,500 vaccines, and people had to call and make the reservation. So we made a nice little graphic, we posted it, and we were expecting the post to just blow up. A lot of shares, a lot of comments, because we know of the demand for the vaccine. And most of the time when I post on Facebook, there will be hundreds and hundreds of likes, hundreds and hundreds of interactions, comments. But when I posted this, there was, I think, 2 interactions, and one of them was a share. So the information was not getting out. So this is a situation where my constituents, and I'm sure it's not just me, are being put at a disadvantage with something as important as COVID-19 vaccinations. So why does this matter? There was a county commissioner, brand new, she just got elected, and she doesn't have a large social media gathering. She posted it, and it was shared like 40 times, a bunch of comments. And I started thinking to myself, and I alerted the speaker, I said, this is what we're talking about here. This is the stuff that actually needs to change. And it just confirmed basically what I already knew, is that public discourse is actually being manipulated by these big tech monopolies. What we see and engage in simply is whatever big tech wants us to see at any given time. And that is a dangerous, dangerous position to be in. We need transparency. We need accountability. So while lawmakers in Washington can sit there and have hearing after hearing after hearing and do nothing, we in the state of Florida, under the leadership of Governor DeSantis, President Simpson, and Speaker Sprowls, are actually going to do something about it. We are going to step up and take action. The one thing that got me really fired up is when Twitter took down the article for the Post, for the New York Post, regarding the Hunter Biden story. And we started saying to ourselves, if they can do this to a reputable news source such as the New York Post, they can do it to everyone. And that should be scary. It should be scary for legislators. It should be scary for constituents. It should be scary for the press, that you have one set of people controlling what we see, what we hear, and eventually, if we only see and hear what they want, they eventually control the way we think. But the thing is, we don't understand how or why. What's the reasoning behind it? We don't understand their algorithms on how they're making the decisions, and if it's an algorithm in itself. It may be a person behind the desk making these decisions. So today's press conference and our actions in Florida is not about regulating businesses. It's about protecting Floridians from monopolistic big tech behavior. It's about demanding transparency. It's about demanding consistency. So regardless of ideology, we should not live in fear that we may lose our voice just because someone in Silicon Valley doesn't like what we have to say. Nobody should have the content, the information, and the ideas they post in the public sphere to be secretly controlled and manipulated. So in short, I guess the best way to sum it up is this. You cannot win on the battlefield of ideas if big tech takes away the battlefield.
Good morning, everybody. It's an honor to be able to stand here with the governor, the lieutenant governor, Speaker of the House, the Senate President, and my colleague and friend in the House who we'll be working with on this important issue, Blaise Ngolia. This is not a new problem, but this is an issue that I kind of view as an issue of first impression, and it's really something that the state of Florida is leaning forward on, something as critical as this when it comes to our rights as Floridians, but more fundamentally, as Americans. The First Amendment states that Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free speech exercise thereof or abridging that freedom of speech. And it seems to me that the government has explicitly granted immunities to Facebook and Twitter and others under the federal law in Section 230. And as publishers of third-party content, they should not be allowed to discriminate based on content and ban individuals just because they don't agree with your viewpoint. At the end of the day, this is about selective censorship. And to me, it's really about a double standard. Regardless of a person's background, political history, religion, race, gender, or any other identifying measure, these big tech platforms cannot and should not be the sole judge, jury, and executioner of Floridians and Americans' rights. For better or for worse, social media has become a major part of our everyday life and society. And as a father with 3 little kids, and I know that we've also got some young dads here too, standing behind me, I'm very concerned about that for a lot of reasons. So these unilateral actions just compound the problem. And the actions that we've seen in recent weeks, it sets a terrifying precedent that I believe must be addressed appropriately. We hear from constituents every day about this issue. In fact, for me, my passion on this really stemmed from a local constituent who I've known for a very long time, local professional, very involved in the community. He came to our office shortly after we were elected and said, "Hey, I was banned by Facebook. I can't get an answer. I've tried. I was wondering if your office might be able to help us." So we did. We tried. And eventually we were able to get a response from Facebook, and to our constituents' dismay, he was labeled and classified as a dangerous person and a part of a dangerous organization. This is, imagine being labeled that and not knowing why, not having a reason, and not necessarily doing anything that would ever rise to the level of something such a horrible label. So this person, because we were able to finally extract the answer, unfortunately, the window of time to where they could reenact their account based on his rebuttal to their determination had run. And so all his intellectual property is gone forever. This is the problem we're trying to address. And it's an honor and a privilege to be able to stand before these leaders and hopefully help get to the heart of this issue and do what Florida can do to protect our rights. Thank you.
I want to thank the legislators. And, some of this technology, I know we've obviously raised a lot of concerns about, but it should be said, some of this stuff has really been great for a lot of people. I think back when I was deployed in Iraq in 2007, that wasn't exactly the technological Stone Age, but if I wanted to communicate with someone back home, I could send an unclassified email, I could take a satellite phone, go in the middle of the desert, get a good signal, and maybe make a call, and there were some other ways, but now you think about it, you could be halfway around the world or on the other side of the country. You can call your family. I could see my kids. If I'm in Miami and Mamie's going to go to bed, I can say goodnight to her on FaceTime. And there's ways you can share things with people that if you're doing something special, you post the photos, whereas before you'd have to mail photos out to people. So there's a lot of really, really good things. People are able to connect in ways that they haven't before. But we also have to just recognize have these platforms contributed to more maladies in society like human trafficking, child pornography? Absolutely. Have they contributed to things in school with kids like bullying? Absolutely. Have they contributed to the coarsening of American discourse and culture? Without question. So these are really significant issues that society has to grapple with. We're looking at protecting privacy. We're looking at protecting people from being censored and deplatformed, and we're looking at protecting people from big tech election interference. Those are really the three overriding issues. And I would say there's been a lot of talk about censorship today. They may come after someone that thinks like me. Tomorrow, they may come after someone that thinks like you. Mike.
Governor, are you afraid that this news conference will be censored, and and what impact can one state have?
Well, I think Blaze had mentioned he put out the thing about the vaccine and didn't get it. So we put out a video about a vaccine update, I think a couple weeks ago on Twitter, and it was flagged for sensitive content. And I'm like, how is that sensitive content? I think we said we got this many vaccines, we're expanding this many sites, here's what we're looking to do. And they flagged it. So some of this stuff is incredibly arbitrary. And what happens is when they have such a hold on the public discourse, you then rely on some of these things to do communications, and that stuff can be really truncated just at the whim of somebody who's in Northern California, probably has some pretty different views than most Floridians do. And that's not a good situation. So we think this will be, we're going to put it out. We'll see if there's any type of stuff. But let's just be clear. Florida's leading in terms of the states, but this is not an issue that other people are not concerned about in other states and in other countries. You look at Poland, you look at the European Union, people are understanding this is something that we're going to have to grapple with. And we got to get it right. And my view is, let's protect Floridians, protect their privacy, protect them from being deplatformed or censored, and protect them from having their elections interfered with. And I think if we're looking at it through that lens, I think we can get a lot of support for it.
Twitter deplatformed the president because they said that his statements incited violence.
Yeah, but they leave Ayatollah Khamenei up to say, kill all the Jews. Give me a break. They are not principled in this. They have so much garbage and filth on that platform all the time. They did not censor people when they were using those platforms for the rioting that occurred over the summer. So their excuse doesn't hold water. And
He said that a candidate will not be allowed to be.
so, for example, I think what we would say is, so here's what I would say. So we have the qualifying in 2022. So say you qualify for U.S. Congress. You have your Facebook, your Twitter. And it's not just that. What really, I think, scared me was the decapitation of Parler. It wasn't just some of that stuff. It was the web hosting, the payment processing, take away your email, your text. You could totally neuter a candidate's ability to communicate and execute a campaign plan. So once we have that situation, they can't deplatform you without consequence. And look, I don't know that there has been, in 2020, we'd have to look, I don't know that there has been a candidate that got wiped off the map. But you see the way this is going, and I think that protection is very well warranted, and I think it should be there. And just think, if you're in October of 2022 and you have a state Senate race or something, and they deplatform one of the two candidates, that's going to have a huge impact on the outcome of the race. And if a Floridian had me over if I was running for, they have me over, we buy food, we buy some signs, I give a speech, that's a contribute. We have to account for all of that because that's helping me further my candidacy. But yet they could potentially deplatform the opposing candidate, they could suppress the message, and that's just something that is somehow okay and free from that. I don't think so. I think we need to hold them accountable.
Do we see that there's no requirement for those that are posting on the internet to have any kind of regulation or any kind of accurate portrayal of events? Because a lot of this is the deplatforming seems to be driven by somebody did something that provoked the platform's attention.
Well, I think it's been done in a way that's completely unprincipled. They mentioned the Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden's story was true. Okay, we now know it was true. And the typical corporate media outlets, they just chose to ignore it. Obviously, they wanted to beat Trump. They had a view on the election. They didn't want to give it any air. So we rely on social media to go around that, not let corporate legacy media outlets control the discourse and let us speak. So you had the New York Post to run it, and you couldn't get any traction. You couldn't get any reach on it because big tech put their thumb on the scale. So that was true. What they said at the time, oh, it's a conspiracy, or it's based on hacked information. Are you kidding me? You're trying to tell me if there was hacked information that could damage me, you guys wouldn't print it? Give me a break. You can whiz on my leg, but don't tell me it's raining. You guys would print it every single day if you could. And big tech would allow it to proliferate every single day, 24/7. So it's not being done on a principled basis. And it's not, there's threats on me. And it only gets taken down if law enforcement goes and tells them to do it. Otherwise, it just stays up. They're not moderating any of that. So they haven't done a good job in it. The thumb's always on the scale in one direction. And we just need to bring some protection for folks. I really, really worry when you have a business owner that may rely on some of these tools to do small business. If they engage in wrongthink or they go to the wrong political event, then all of a sudden they can act in concert and just take you off. You need to have protection against that.
I did want to ask about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Obviously, we know that the efficacy rate is a little lower than what some people were expecting. So my question is, are we going to prioritize that vaccine to maybe be less vulnerable in Florida once it's received, and then give Moderna and Pfizer to those who are more vulnerable?
Well, look, I made some comments yesterday. When the headline is Johnson & Johnson less effective than Pfizer and Moderna, look, it was, in the U.S., I think it was 77%, but what they did, they averaged all the efficacy from around the world, and they came up with, I think, 66%. But that is for preventing infection. After 28 days of J&J, it was 100% effective at preventing death and virtually 100% effective at preventing hospitalization. So to me, you have one dose, you take it, no freezing, just put it in the refrigerator. It potentially can be produced at a mass scale. This is remarkable good news. This is tremendous news. And yes, maybe you focus that on younger people and maybe offer the elderly the Moderna and the Pfizer. But the Moderna, that's a 28-day regimen too. I mean, that's not kicking in until probably even after 28 days. So this Pfizer is really good. And at the end of the day, getting infected and being asymptomatic or having a fever for a day, I mean, obviously, you'd rather not have to deal, but that's a normal malady. J&J basically takes this virus and transforms it from something that can be life-threatening to certain people to something that you will absolutely be able to deal with. Not only you won't die, but you won't even go to the hospital. So that is good news, and that's something that we really, really need to be supportive of. Once we figure out how much we're getting, whatever the feds send us, then we can make determinations about the best way to use it. There may be some folks who are seniors who may prefer J&J. Who knows? We'll see. Once it starts getting used, there'll be people that'll kind of wait, and then once it starts being used, we'll be able to see. And I also think the FDA should figure out a way to get this AstraZeneca approved. They're using it in Britain. I think they've done 1 million shots in Britain, and I don't even think we're even close to having it approved here in the United States. And again, the AstraZeneca, I think, is similar to J&J. It's 2 doses, but the severe disease and death, it does a really good job of neutralizing that. And to me, that's the name of the game. That's what we're looking for.
Governor, do you have an idea what this protection might look like? What the boundaries are for not deplatforming?
Well, so I talked a little bit. I mean, so the Attorney General can bring action against the companies. And so if you are advertising as being an open forum, and then you're not following through with that, you're violating your own terms of service, you're changing terms of service willy-nilly, then they can go. There's also private right of action potentially. So that's really the mechanism. It's less government in terms of the platforming, regulating, saying, hey, and more relying on people to vindicate their rights. But I actually think that that's effective in this regard. And who would think, me sitting here, someone that supports a lot of legal reform, supporting a cause of action with big tech, because I think it could be effective. Yes, sir.
Liability protections for healthcare, how far do you think those protections should go
The long-term care should be protected, and here's why. We're vaccinating the folks. All the seniors at this point have been offered it. Now, more will take it because some didn't want to do it. They wanted to see how it would go. Then when you go back for their second dose, more people sign up for the first dose. But here's what we have to do. Once you go through that, you need to open it up entirely. I mean, we obviously push to have visitation, but a lot of these folks are very worried about liability. And here's the concern. The less normal the daily routine is for those seniors, the more problems you're going to have with loneliness, with despair, with all these things we've seen for months and months and months. And so we should say, got the vaccines in there. Obviously, as more seniors get there, if more need it, we'll keep doing it. But they need to feel comfortable returning to normal because that's what's going to protect the psyche. It's what's going to protect people's quality of life. And we obviously are trying to protect their lives, but not just that. We're trying to make sure their life is still worth living. And it's been a very big struggle. I think they have done better in the last 4 or 5 months in terms of doing a little bit more. But you go in there, I mean, there's a lot of mitigation that's still being, and I'm not even criticizing it. I mean, you got to protect people, but I just don't want them to say, well, we can't do all this stuff because we're scared of getting sued. I mean, the fact is, now that we have the vaccines in there, those have been offered, I think we need to give them every protection to return to normal. And I think that would be really, really good.
Divest the tech stocks.
What's that?
The call to divest the tech stocks. Is that on the table for you?
Well, I said I'm willing to look at it, but the issue with that is that does not protect Floridians. It really just is them using their stuff. We've tried not to get involved with what they're doing. Obviously, in exceptional circumstances, when you have someone discriminating against Israel or you have some of these hostile actors, we've looked to do it. So I'm open to it. I'm open to seeing what it would mean. But I don't think that would markedly change the behavior of big tech at all. I mean, these are really big companies. I don't know how much is invested there. I'd like to look at that report, but I got to imagine that they have market caps that this would be a drop in the bucket for.
We got here on basically part of what happened in the deplatforming of the president was basically a series of comments over 2 months where he was questioning the validity of the election. He referred to some of the people that stormed the Capitol as patriots. And I've not yet heard you say one way or the other, A, did the president bear any responsibility for what happened at the Capitol? And B, do you agree with the president that the election was stolen from him and that there was widespread fraud?
So here's what I would say. How many people tweeted in 2016, 17, 18, 19, and 20 that Russia stole the election for Trump? That happened every day. Thousands of times a day. Nancy Pelosi said the election was taken from us by Russia. Did any of those people get deplatformed? I don't remember even anyone calling for them to deplatform. Now, obviously, the collusion was a conspiracy theory. It was not based in fact. They did an exhaustive investigation, found squat, and yet that was common practice to be able to say that. And so to not deplatform some, but then to deplatform others when they're making claims, I just don't see how that would be there. But those claims of collusion were amplified by big tech. They were amplified by social media for years. It was the dominant point of discourse in our country, and it was without a factual basis. And so it's not a heads I win, tails, or heads you win, tails I lose situation. If you're going to have one standard, then that'd be one thing. But I think that's the problem. This is why the Founding Fathers felt the need to do the First Amendment. Because, you can sit there and look at speech, and there's some speech that definitely provides no value. Some speech that could even be harmful for society. But who gets to make those determinations? Who gets to draw that line? And when you're somebody that's perched in Silicon Valley, and you're woke, and you believe George Washington and Abraham Lincoln should be removed from the schools, and you have all these different views, you're not someone that's going to be a referee, just as I may not be someone that would referee speech that you think would be important. That is the problem with all this. It can't be done in a principled way, and it's going to be done that exhibits the bias of the people in Silicon Valley. Those folks will take some questions if you want. I got to go back and work on it.
You didn't answer the question, sir. You didn't answer the question as to whether or not you believe the election was stolen or whether or not the president bear any responsibility for what happened. That was the question, sir.
Clay, will you stay with us for a minute?
Senator Burke later.
Is the bill been filed? Here.